Lately in my videos, I've had something of a tendency to come down pretty hard on Christian practices. Here I'll be coming down on a certain Muslim practice and several related Muslim practices instead. You see, it annoys me a bit when a Christian says, "You just need to read the Bible," relying on this as a handy excuse to discount all my arguments. Don't bother me with these feats of reasoning, but instead, let me dictate how you spend your free time, but don't even think about telling me how to spend mine. Whoops. I thought about it. Sorry. But instead, when a Muslim says, "You just need to read the Quran," this takes on a whole extra dimension of compound annoyance because of a certain dishonest omission. You see, when a Christian says, "You just need to read the Bible," he or she means in any language you happen to understand, but apparently being in Arabic is a defining characteristic of the Quran. Apparently translations of the Quran are not the Quran. Apparently the Quran cannot be translated into any other language without losing meaning. Apparently the words English Quran, or Spanish Quran, or Chinese Quran are contradictory. This doesn't count, or so I'm told, since God is monolingual. When a Muslim says, "You just need to read the Quran," he or she is saying, "You just need to learn Arabic." That's all. I give you the lie by omission, the Muslim favorite. Now, one detail I find especially amusing about this particular part is that one country which claims to be Muslim is Iran, where the main language is Persian. Most Iranians can't actually read Arabic. Doesn't the Grand Ayatollah want Iranians to be able to read the Quran? Going on to another example, many a Muslim is very quick to point to verses in the Quran which condemn violence against the innocent, but neglect to point to any verses which define this term. Innocent of what? What kind of person gets to be called innocent? What kind of person gets to receive the protection of these verses? Most of us in the West tend to define innocent a certain way, and so we tend to make the assumption that others, including Muslims, categorically define it the same way. Indeed, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that most of them do. Most of the ones I've known certainly have. The problem is the highly vocal minority who define it differently. To these Muslim demographics, a guilty person is someone who is guilty of specifically denying the will of God as it is presented exclusively in Islam. This definition encompasses all non-Muslims. We are all guilty. We don't get to be called innocent. For these demographics, when they condemn violence against the innocent, they refer exclusively to violence against Muslims. The demographics in question have no objection whatsoever to violence against non-Muslims. That's another handy omission. I once saw a video of a Muslim woman arguing that Islam is much more progressive than it is often made out to be. As evidence of this, she claimed that most Muslim nations granted women the right to vote centuries before a Western nation did. Now, I don't know for certain whether this is the case, but I've read that in a number of Muslim nations in which women are allowed to vote, that vote does not carry equal weight to a man's. I predict that someone is going to ask me to point to evidence that this is the case. My response to this is to call for evidence that what this woman claims is the case. While we're at it, can anyone point to a Muslim nation where men are subjected to some combination of state mandate and social pressure to keep their hair and faces covered? And while I'm on that subject, in the comments on one of my videos, a Muslim woman actually defended the practice of wearing the burqa on the grounds that, well, you can't guarantee that every man you come into contact with is not having sexual thoughts about you. Well, if that manner of guarantee is in fact impossible, then why are you defending the burqa as if it has precisely that effect? By the same token, how come you aren't making the argument to men that they can't guarantee that every woman they come into contact with isn't having sexual thoughts about them? What about changes in sexual orientation? This argument targets a woman's fear of rape, a fear greatly amplified by ignorance of one simple fact. The rapist is not driven by sexual desire. He is driven by the need to dominate someone. Now, we are taking a part of the world in which when a woman is raped, it is assumed that she did something to bring it on herself, and she is therefore blamed for it. Another handy omission. This makes the women in that part of the world who fall victim to this heinous crime especially inclined not to come forward about it, and as a result, one can be sure that the reported occurrence of rape is lower than the actual occurrence. So given the fact that the average rapist is male and driven by the need to dominate someone, and since women are typically smaller and weaker than men, and since any woman in the Islamic world who is raped is likely not to come forward about it, all these factors conspire to make the women in that part of the world especially easy to dominate, and therefore especially inclined to fall victim to this crime. In the West, the reported occurrence is much more accurate because in the West, we blame the party who commits the crime, not the party who falls victim to it. I once also saw a brief clip from a debate about law and policy in Muslim nations. Apparently in the Muslim nation in question, women are not allowed to drive. The Muslim fellow arguing in defense of this policy actually said that women don't want to drive. Hello? You are talking to a woman. You are talking to a woman and presuming to tell her what she doesn't want. I'll tell you what. Let's assume for a moment that that's true, beyond dispute, that women don't want to drive. What reason then could you possibly have for making laws against it? If it's legal for women to drive, but they don't want to, then they won't. Ah, but wait a minute. Perhaps you're concerned about women being coerced into driving in the event that it's legal. Well, if that's the case, then what you need are laws against that coercion, not the act of driving itself. Furthermore, if that is indeed your concern, then how come you're not worried about men being coerced into it? A YouTuber with the username Discuss Islam is a post-Muslim agnostic. He recently had a video up on his channel about a post-Muslim living in a Western nation whose official permission had just expired, and he was in danger of being sent back to his country of origin. As someone who has left Islam and publicly abandoned Islamic belief, he faced the death penalty upon his return. The penalty for leaving Islam, for apostasy, is death. But you can be sure the next time someone tries to talk to you about what a wonderful, peaceful, progressive, scientific religion this is, this individual is going to try to give you all manner of convenient reasons to convert to it, but is going to omit that inconvenient little detail. Now that I've come down on a favorite Muslim practice, I'm next going to come down